I have no idea what just happened. So that was unique. I have no clue what just happened, but the webinar got ended and I restarted it. Not really. That is the look I would expect to have on my face too. I don't have a clue what just happened. Cody, you can drop off video and we should have Drew back. So I have no idea what just happened, but depending upon that was fascinating. I don't know what happened, but I am Cody at this chance. So seems like we got a lot of our attendees back. So we're going to get started anyways. I don't know what happened, but the webinar ended and came back. So that was super fascinating. So either way, I'm Dan McGaugh. Thanks so much for being able to join us today. We're getting started just 1 minute late. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can help you ultimately build your attribution to be successful using UTMs. So, but why are we here ultimately? Drew, if you want to go to the next slide. Who am I and why am I one of the people that should be helping you figure this stuff out? Well, I am Dan McGaugh. I'm the CEO of UTM.io, one of the leaders in data governance for UTM management. I've been in the marketing space for over 20 years, so I've had the wonderful fortune to work at some cool companies like Kissmetrics, Code School, and I've been able to do consulting for a lot of big brands out there, ranging from companies like Bauer Hockey to Coinbase to Fender Guitars, and done a bunch of different consulting out in the space as well. I'm also the CEO at McGaugh.io, a tech stack agency. So if you're ever looking for any tech stack support, check out McGaugh.io. But what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit more about UTM, which is one of our focuses of today. We are going to be talking a lot about UTMs. If you are using UTMs and you're sick of that messy spreadsheet, I would definitely recommend go check out UTM.io. It's an amazing product, which is going to kill that UTM spreadsheet for you. It's a free tool, so you can get started for free and use it however you want. And then it also has an amazing Chrome extension that you can use, which will work directly in your browser. Next slide, please, Drew. There we go. So one, it does a great job with team collaboration and as well as syncing all of your UTMs between your team. You can use UTM rules to make it so that anybody on your team is able to create UTMs without breaking your taxonomy. You can do custom campaign conventions. There's UTM templates. As I mentioned, the Chrome extension will follow you anywhere. And you can build unlimited links, have unlimited click tracking, and as well as have unlimited team members on there. And we have some massive teams at companies like Shopify, Unilever, Hexacon Global, all kinds of amazing companies use the product to really keep their UTMs in check. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Let's move on to what we're going to dig into today. I'm super excited. We have a buddy of mine, Drew, who we've been talking a lot about UTMs for a long time. His company, Attribution, is amazing at helping companies figure out how to get their attribution in check. Drew, you want to do a quick introduction for everybody and get us kicked off?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Appreciate the intro there. And yeah, really looking forward to talking about UTMs and how they power attribution. So I'm Drew. I'm the CEO of Attribution.io. And what we started this company to do is to help solve attribution problems. And I've been working in the marketing world for 20-ish years. And my attribution journey started like 15 years ago when I was coordinating 100 trade shows a year and had no way to actually connect any of those back to pipeline or deals or anything like that. And, you know, about 6 years ago, I saw my first demo of an attribution platform that you're all familiar with, Visible, and fell in love. And I've been a marketing attribution fanatic ever since then. So I started Attribution as a very unique company because we're really the first of its kind organization where marketing attribution is our primary core service. A lot of other companies, you know, attribution is a secondary, tertiary, or whatever comes after tertiary focus. And but that's not the case for us. So we've worked in basically most of the attribution platforms that exist, like Visible and Full Circle and Terminus Hub, which used to be Bright Funnel and CaliberMind and Dream Data and a whole bunch of others. So hopefully I can add some value with this webinar and help you understand how attribution works, and particularly in relation to UTMs, so that you can start building some really good foundations in your UTM strategy and usage. So enough about me and Attribution. Let's talk specifically about how UTMs help power attribution and how to be successful with them. So Our agenda for today is there's really three key things that we're going to talk about today, which is what are UTMs, how are they used, and then how do UTMs play a role in attribution, and then also how small, medium, and large organizations use UTMs differently. And then we're going to save some time at the end for questions if you have any of those. Okay, perfect. So what the heck are UTMs? So UTMs have a very long history. They've been around forever. And UTM stands for Urchin Tracking Mechanism. Don't ask me why it stands for that or where that came from. I'm sure there's history of it, but that's what it stands for. And the use of UTMs is very unique to how Google and Google Analytics track web activity. And because UTMs are very specific and unique to the way that Google Analytics works, they became ubiquitous. And so everybody uses UTMs to track where traffic comes from. So essentially what we have here on the screen is we've got a little bit of an outline of what a URL looks like with UTMs. So you've got your domain, and then after that, you've got the question mark, and then you've got your UTMs that go on and on and on. We'll get a little bit deeper into how these work and kind of the structure of the URL, but this is just a quick intro into how this all works. So I'm going to move to the next slide here. So going a little bit deeper into this, UTMs exist in the portion of the URL that's called the URI. URI stands for Uniform Resource Identifier. And it's basically everything that comes after the .com, .io, or whatever comes after the domain. That's called the URI. Now, there's a portion of the URI where UTM and other parameters are stored. And that's all after the question mark. So you've all seen URLs that have that question mark in them. Everything that comes after the question mark is a part of the query string. And the query string has the UTM tags in it, as well as potentially other URL parameters. So what's the difference between a URL parameter and a UTM parameter? A UTM parameter is to URL parameter as square is to rectangle. Or another way of saying that is all UTM parameters are URL parameters, but not all URL parameters are UTM parameters. UTMs are very, very specific. There's like 5 of them. We'll cover them. URL parameters can be completely custom. You can do whatever you want to do with a URL parameter, but you can't do whatever you want to do with a UTM. UTMs, there's 5 of them. We're limited. And the way that they work in the URL is that they have that leading question mark. And then when you add multiple parameters, you add the and sign in between the parameter. And that's how we know that there's going to be more than one parameter in that URL. Okay. So now that we know what a UTM is and kind of how it works in the URL itself, let's talk a little bit deeper about how UTMs actually work. So UTMs are designed to tell web tracking software where someone came from when they landed on a web page. They pass data from the website back into any platforms that are designed to look for them. And there's a lot of platforms that are designed to look for UTMs. So first off is Google Analytics. We all know that one. But even Google Analytics competitors like Adobe Analytics, which used to be Omniture, use UTMs and they look for UTMs. Marketing automation platforms like Marketo, HubSpot, Pardot, and all of those look for and use UTMs. Attribution platforms like Marketo Measure, now it used to be Visible, CaliberMind, and Dream Data, they all look for UTMs as well because they're so ubiquitous. Everybody uses them. So all of these platforms are looking for and using UTMs. Now, some of them just use UTMs to track things like Google Analytics and Adobe Analytics. Marketing automation platforms, you can use UTMs and capture UTMs and action off of them. So you can actually create automated workflows based on the presence of specific UTMs or other values in UTMs. So this is kind of the purpose that they serve, is allowing us to understand how somebody got to your website, either for tracking purposes or for actioning. Now, there are 3 UTMs that are required if you're going to use UTMs. That's UTM source, UTM medium, and UTM campaign. You have to use those. UTM term and UTM content are optional. You don't have to use those if you're using UTMs. So the way that the URL breaks down when you're using these is you've got this section here, which is the .com, which is where is the traffic going. You've got your UTM source, which is really kind of like where it came from, the specific like website that it came from. Then you've got your UTM medium, which is how did the traffic get there? And then you've got your specific campaign, which is designed to answer like a very narrow question about like why is the traffic actually going to this website? In total, you've got these 5 parameters: source, medium, campaign, and term and content. UTM source. UTM source is designed to track the source of the traffic. It's like a very specific source, like a website, like Facebook, LinkedIn, AdWords, things like that. The medium is the channel of the traffic, or the medium, which would be things like paid social, paid search, partner referral. It's like a category. Source is more specific, medium is category. UTM campaign is, again, going to be the name of the campaign the traffic came from. We're going to get a lot deeper into that one because that one's actually super important. UTM term really specifically applies to keywords. You can use it for other things, but its primary design is for keywords. And UTM content is going to show the content of the ad. Again, it's primarily used for ads, but you can use UTM content for other things as well. But that's the primary use, is to show the content of the ad. Now, quick note, GA4 is coming out. We all know that. GA4 is actually going to give you some additional UTMs that you can use above and beyond these 5. But we're not going to go deep into those right now because GA4 is still super new. Not a lot of people are even like using it or even kick the tires on it yet. So we'll save that for a future webinar. But these are the 5 that are currently out there in the world and primarily used. So when you use UTM parameters and when you combine these together, along with a really, really solid strategy, you have a really powerful tool that allows you to track and organize your web traffic data. So we've got some examples here of URL 1, 2, and 3 of how you would use UTMs to track different sources. So URL 1 would be somebody that's coming from paid social, specifically LinkedIn, and is tied to a very specific product launch. So paid social, LinkedIn, and a specific product launch. URL number 2 is coming from paid search, specifically Google paid search. It's also tied to a product launch. Your term would be some sort of keyword that's tied to the problem that is solved by your new product. And your content is the actual ad content for that specific keyword and that campaign. URL number 3 is very similar to URL number 1. It's showing that we're coming from paid social, specifically Facebook, and then also tied to a product launch. So just some examples of how UTMs are structured for different use cases. So when would you use UTMs? It's a really easy answer to that question. Anytime you want to track a URL and be able to tell that someone clicked on it to come to your website, and you want to know where they came from. Simple. If you want to track it, you use UTMs. Some examples of where to use UTMs. Paid search. Obviously, you've got AdWords, but you also have things like Bing and other paid search platforms. Yahoo is still in use sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes. So paid search is a great place. Social media, whether it's paid social or organic social. There's a ton of new social media platforms coming out all the time. So if you want to gauge how your different social media platforms and strategies are working, you got to use UTMs. Display. Display is, your Google Display Network. It's your ad roll. It's your double click. But it's also, display is also things like if you have ABM platforms like 6 Sense, Demand-Based, Terminus, that's also display. Display also counts for if you're doing targeted ad buys with a specific media partner, that's also display. So you've got to track those. So you want to use UTMs. Email. Sending emails out. We all get emails all the time. If you haven't ever noticed, you'll notice now, if you look at the URLs, when you click on an email link, you'll see everybody's UTMs in there. Partner referrals. These are huge. Partner referrals. If you have a partner network and that partner network sends traffic to your website, embed UTMs in those URLs. Or if you're doing something specific, like a specific partner email or something like that, that might fall under email. It might also fall under partner referrals. But if you want to track how your partner engagement is working, UTMs. Review sites, G2, Trustpilot, Capterra, all of those. You have the ability to add UTMs there. Public relations. Sometimes public relations will allow you to use UTMs. Usually it won't, but it never hurts to ask. So if you are, if you have some sort of an article out there, some sort of PR release that's getting published, you want to try at least to put UTMs in there so that you can track any links that come from that press release. All right, so how do UTMs play a role in attribution? Attribution platforms usually have two primary sources of data. You've got online sources and offline sources. Online sources are those where there's a JavaScript that's on your website that is responsible for tracking that interaction with marketing. The JavaScript creates, I'm using the term touch points here because it's a pretty ubiquitous term in marketing attribution world, but the JavaScript basically creates these touch points. Offline sources are those where the interaction takes place outside of the view of the JavaScript. So we use things like Salesforce campaigns, Salesforce activities, marketing automation activities, a lot of different things to create the touch points. The online sources are where UTMs play a very, very important role. The offline sources are where they don't play a role at all, actually. So once the touch point's created, the marketing attribution platform needs to categorize that touch point into a channel and sometimes a sub-channel so that you can organize and filter your reports. For the offline sources, they use things like campaign type and activity type. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me. They use campaign type and activity type and a lot of other different data types that can be used to categorize those. But for the online sources, there's really only a few data points that you can use. And those are things like landing page, referring URL, and then UTMs. UTMs are used to fill the gaps because you may have one specific landing page or a specific referring URL, but you could have a lot of different sources of traffic that are coming to that landing page or that are coming from that referring URL. So like if I have a referring URL that says LinkedIn, well, is it paid or is it organic? I can't tell. But with UTMs, I can tell. I may have a landing page that's being used for an AdWords ad, that's being used for a LinkedIn ad, that's being used for 3 or 4 other ads. So I can't just rely on the landing page to tell me where it came from. I have to add the UTM to fill in those gaps. Now, attribution platforms, a lot of attribution platforms have integrations with your advertising platforms like AdWords, LinkedIn, Facebook, and all that stuff. You don't want to just rely on the integrations though. They're great. They provide a lot of fantastic data, but sometimes they fail or sometimes they don't work properly. So you can't just rely on the integrations to do that categorization for you. You still need to have a good solid UTM strategy in place. You have to. So don't rely on integrations. Have integrations and a good UTM strategy. That way you have the best and most durable process possible. Consistency. This is the most important thing when it comes to marketing attribution. I don't care if we're talking online channels or offline channels. Consistency. The most common issues that I see for organizations that have been on a marketing attribution platform for a year, 2 years, 3 years is a lack of consistency. They don't do things the same way every single time. So what do I mean by consistency? What I mean by consistency is using UTMs all the time. If sometimes you tag social media posts with UTMs and sometimes you don't, well, your attribution platform is going to get confused and probably miscategorize some of your touch points. If you don't use the same values every single time, every single time you're using that type of a medium or that type of a source, your marketing attribution platform is going to get confused and it's going to miscategorize those into the wrong channel or sub-channel. Or if you don't use the parameters the same way, capital letters, somehow, some reason, UTMs were designed to be case sensitive. Don't know why, but they were. So capital F Facebook, not the same as lowercase f Facebook. MailChimp, that's two different values. If you use spaces versus dashes, it's different values. Dashes versus underscores, different values. So you have to be very consistent in the way you use it. Don't leave things to chance with capital letters, just lowercase letters for everything. Like, it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but it does matter when you're talking about how marketing attribution platforms interpret those UTMs, because they are case sensitive. So you have to be consistent. If you aren't consistent, I promise you, your attribution platform will get confused and it won't know where to categorize those touch points. So this is what good looks like. This is a good UTM creation process. It starts with the campaign on the left. You define the campaign name that you want to use. Then you outline all of your mediums that are going to fall into that campaign. You just go down the list, all the mediums. And then within your mediums, you outline your sources, and you go down the list and you outline all of your sources. When you do it this way, you will have a really solid UTM strategy that you can follow consistently. So let's look at that in practice. So we're doing a product launch XYZ. Product launches are almost always multi-channel campaigns. And so I want to create a UTM strategy for my product launch. I'm going to start with the campaign. And I'm going to define what my campaign parameter is going to be. And it's going to be campaign XYZ. And if you notice, every single usage of that campaign throughout the whole thing looks exactly the same. I don't change it with dashes or spaces. I don't add anything else to the UTM campaign, because when I'm creating reports in my attribution platform, I want to be able to filter reports for one value, not 15 values. My UTM mediums come next, where I'm looking at, here's my paid socials and my organic socials. Then I've got my sources. On my paid socials, I'm looking at LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. On my organic socials, I'm looking at LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And even here, they're all the same. So if I wanted to run a report for paid social, but not organic social, I filter for that. If I want to run a report for LinkedIn, I can filter for LinkedIn, and these two would pop up. Or if I want to filter for Facebook, I would filter for Facebook, and these two would pop up. This is a really good, solid UTM strategy. Now let's look at what bad looks like. This is what bad looks like. With bad, you're actually starting not from the campaign, but you're starting from the source, then engineering your mediums, and then engineering your campaigns. And you end up with something like this: campaign 1, 2, 3, or these branding versus product launch, or brand awareness versus customer testimonials. And what ends up happening is you can't filter, you can't group your reports properly. And so in that, using that same product launch XYZ example, you end up with a mess, because you end up with, well, here's my sources. Well, and here I didn't, I wasn't consistent. I used capital letters. Same thing for Facebook. I used a capital letter. So these are different. Here I added an underscore, which makes it so that these two are not the same as this. Here, I didn't even use anything even remotely close to the same. So there's really no way for me to group organic social into one report. And then over here in the campaign, I've got campaign XYZ. Now I've got campaign XYZ Facebook, campaign XYZ Facebook, product launch XYZ. It's all over the place. There's no consistency to any of this. So generating reports from this is nearly impossible. I wouldn't be able to create one report looking for campaign XYZ because I've got campaign XYZ Facebook, and product launch XYZ. So it would be very difficult to create and filter report for all of this. All right, so how do organizations use UTMs differently? So we talk about small orgs, medium orgs, and large orgs. And when you see the 1 to 3 users, the 3 to 10 users, and the plus 10 users, that is essentially the number of people in the organization that are creating trackable URLs, creating URLs that have UTMs applied to them. So that's what the users means. Nimble, slower to market, and slow to market. Nimble means we're able to churn out trackable UTMs very quickly, usually because we've got very few people. The more people we add in, it makes it more difficult to get UTMs into market because there's more conversations that have to happen. There's more people involved. And so the more people you have involved, the slower to market you are. The next bullet here about users being well integrated into operational processes. What I mean by that is operational processes, meaning like, hey, we've got, we're launching this campaign. We've got a team that launches the campaign. We've got a completely separate team that runs the marketing automation platform that needs to be aware of the UTMs so that they can set up the structure and the workflows in the automation platform. And then we've got a separate Salesforce team that cares about capturing UTM data. And then we've got a separate team that runs the marketing attribution platform. So how integrated these teams are is usually dependent upon how big the organization is. Small organizations usually have a standard naming convention because it's really easy to, because you don't have that many people. The more people you have involved, the less standardized it becomes, but the greater the need for standardized naming conventions. So when you have a team of 1 to 3 people, it's really easy to make that work. But when you have 15 people across multiple geographies, you have to have a standard naming convention. If you do not, it's going to be very difficult to work with. Inter-team communication and coordination. That's kind of what I was talking about with operational processes. If you have multiple groups and multiple teams that rely on UTMs, you need to have really good inter-team communication and coordination to make sure that everybody that needs to know what those UTMs are knows what those values are and can put those into the automation workflows, the attribution platform, and the Salesforce instance. Small organizations usually use a basic spreadsheet to track UTM usage. That's what most organizations are using. But as you scale and get bigger, that's where you really need automation. That's where you need a platform like UTM.io to make it so that you don't have this messy spreadsheet. You don't have people that can go rogue and create their own values. You need a process for adding new values. Again, when you've got a small organization, adding new values is really easy because there's like 2 people, 3 people involved. But the more you get, the more people you have, you've got to put a process in place to add new values as your marketing organization adds on more tactics and more channels. Usually with small organizations, it's a pretty manual and cumbersome process, and it's prone to errors because you've got a small group of people. You don't need a big automated platform like UTM.io. But as you grow up, as you scale up, you've got to start adding some more automation in there and put guardrails in there and even put some walls in there sometimes so that people don't start going rogue and they don't violate that consistency rule. So this is really kind of how small organizations and medium organizations and large organizations, these are kind of like the characteristics that you see and the needs that they have. So this is kind of how your maturity curve is going to work as you and your organization scale up. You have to be thinking down the road, when we start having 8 people that can create trackable UTMs or 15 people in different time zones and geographies, like how do we keep a standardized, tight, consistent process? So that's my presentation. Thank you all for listening. Again, Attributa is here. If you have any questions about marketing attribution, if you need any help with navigating the marketing attribution journey and maturity curve, we'd love to be able to help you with that. We've been doing this for years, so keep us in mind. And then Dan, I think you had some final words to say about UTM.
Yeah, good job, man. Great presentation. Really appreciate it. Got a lot of good nuggets out of there. For anybody in the audience, we are going to be doing Q&A in just a few moments. I saw a few questions come in as well, so looking forward to asking some of those questions. If you have any questions on the bottom of your screen, just use that Q&A widget. We would love to answer any questions that you have. For an offer today, of course, if you want to get a free month trial of the enterprise plan at utm.io, just send out an email over to mike@utm.io to take advantage of this offer. Love to give you an opportunity to try out the enterprise offering for free and ultimately see how that can help your organization. But let's jump right into Q&A. So Drew, I guess one of my questions that I have is like, when you think about the common things that organizations don't track as part of their attribution, right? Like, what are some of the things that people are typically not tracking that they should when it comes down to attribution in general?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, when we start going down attribution, when we start the attribution journey, the easy stuff that people get is like the AdWords, the social media, the stuff like that. The stuff that's more difficult to put tracking into, and a lot of times gets missed, is PR, for example, because PR, a lot of times in PR, you can't use UTMs. Like, they won't allow you to use UTMs. And so in lieu of UTMs, what we usually do is we put a process in place where you've got a URL for media, like a landing page for media, and then all of your press releases have that same URL structure. So it would be like, mydomain.com/media would be the main landing page. And then mydomain.com/media/article 1, 2, 3 would be the URLs for all subsequent press releases. And so in that case, we use landing page and the URL structure to build the rules in the attribution platform. So that's a tough one. That's a tricky one because most media partners won't allow you to use UTMs. Some that a lot of times just get forgotten and skipped are the partner things. If you are an organization that has partner relationships and you work with partners to generate leads, if you work with partners and partners are sending, traffic over to you, a lot of the times I have clients that I work with that have literally no tracking strategy in place for partner referrals from the website. And so we usually have to build those as we're doing an attribution implementation or optimization project so that they can track that. Because most organizations just don't think to put UTMs in those. They're just like, oh, it's coming from our partner. That's great. So they don't think to put UTMs in those.
Yeah.
There's a huge one that comes up all the time if you listen to some very loud voices on LinkedIn about podcasts. Can't track podcasts. Well, that's wrong. That's incorrect. You can track podcasts with attribution, but you have to, it's like every other channel that you have to create a strategy behind it. And you can embed UTMs in links from podcasts. Like, just because a link is hosted in Spotify doesn't mean you can't embed UTMs in it.
Yeah, I mean, vanity URLs are very common. I mean, if you went to stackcourse.io, I think one of our vanity URLs, like those load up UTMs and stuff like that. So vanity URL, short URLs. One of the questions that came in is, as Google goes for this cookieless browser, right? Like, are UTMs still going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a yes and no answer because it depends. One of the things that's kind of tricky with UTMs is when somebody first clicks over to your website, the UTMs are present on that link. The next click, UTMs get stripped from your URL. So that's where you have to have something that stores those UTMs, and you can either store it in a cookie, or you can store it in local storage, or you can capture it immediately, but you've got to do something there. Now, what Google's not going to do is Google's not going to prevent you from having a cookie on your own website. That's a first party cookie. What Google's trying to prevent is third-party cookies, where I can put my cookie on UTM.io's website. That's what Google's trying to prevent. So first-party cookies are going to be fine, and that's how you're going to store UTMs in that new environment.
Yeah. And even with Apple's ITP, Intelligent Tracking Prevention, right? You're still allowed to have first-party cookies, and you're still allowed to use UTM parameters. URL parameters are not going away. They're still going to go in that path. I guess like when you think about like creating PDFs, right? Maybe you have PDFs that you have for gated content, or maybe you're promoting these on social media, right? And these are just PDFs that maybe are hosted on a CDN like Amazon, AWS, or something like that. Do you think that the links inside of those PDFs should have UTMs as well?
Do you want to track them?
So yes, absolutely. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's that simple. So, I mean, if you want to track it, you've got to find a mechanism to do that, which is usually going to be PDFs. Now, the interesting thing about, or excuse me, UTMs, not PDFs. The interesting thing about PDFs, though, is that you can't actually embed a UTM in a link that links to a PDF, because a PDF is a file. So once you click on that file, like UTMs aren't visible.
Yeah.
They're just like, they can't be tracked. So links from a PDF to a URL, you can embed UTMs. Links to a PDF, you can embed UTMs, but when the person arrives at the PDF, those UTMs are not visible to any tracking systems. So a good example of how that could be used is if you are, I'm going to use Marketo as an example because it's the marketing automation platform I know best. In Marketo, it tracks an activity log. And when you click a link, Marketo creates a record for a clicked link. So it will show that you clicked a link on this PDF with these UTMs because it sees the link click. But it doesn't see when it then has another activity that shows that you visited the PDF. It doesn't show UTMs in relation to that PDF on the viewed PDF activity in the activity log. So it's depending on the systems that you have in play and how they work, you may be able to get some utility out of UTMs that are pushing to a PDF, but you may not. It just depends on how those systems are tracking things.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Now, I guess like one of the questions, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but like, why are source, medium, and campaign not optional, right? Like, why are they required?
Yeah. The reason for that is, well, I mean, that goes back years and years ago. It was a decision made by Google and Google Analytics, and I was not in that meeting. So I don't know what the actual reasoning behind that is. But if you were to use only one of those three, you would get like no utility out of using that. It would be pointless. If you were to use two of the three, you're kind of going to get some usage from it. So I don't know why you would ever want to use just one or two as opposed to all three. There's probably some very technical limitations inside Google Analytics that is why those requirements are there, because of the way they work. But you're not going to get much value out of just using one of those three. So you should use all three anyway.
Yeah. And I would actually recommend one of the other questions was asking if UTM.io even works with custom URL parameters and as well as things like that. I recommend you use even more parameters than what is offered. So source, medium, and campaign are very helpful, but you can also use term and content, but you can also create your own things. Another common thing that we see is a lot of companies will make the mistake of trying to use UTMs internally on their website. So they'll link their navigation to their landing page using UTMs. That is a big no-go. What you can do is create what's known as an ITM, which is an internal tracking mechanism, and you can build out your analytics tool to track those things. So I would recommend using even more context to your analytics when possible. I guess like when you think, Drew, when you think about like, a lot of people are moving from Google Analytics Universal and they're going to be moving over to GA4, right? Is it going to be like easier to track UTMs in GA4? And like, what's the difference between Universal Analytics and GA4 when it comes to UTMs?
Yeah, so I'm going to be completely open and honest. I am not as far down the GA4 path as I would like to be right now. So what I do know is that there's going to be more UTMs available to us. And my understanding is that it's going to be easier to track UTMs. But I would say that I am not currently a GA4 expert, although I imagine I will be in the future.
Yeah, so with GA4, you will have your UTMs, but there's also new UTM parameters coming out for GA4 as well. So you'll be able to add some additional context, which GA4 will track. There's some additional variables that you'll be able to use. But the big thing I would just always try to help people understand is, like, when you think about your analytics, Google Analytics should not be the only place that you're tracking GA Universal or GA4, right? So we definitely recommend a lot of companies to get set up with an Amplitude, or even being able to track all of your data to a warehouse and report on that using something else. You want to know who those users are that are doing those actions. So definitely really, really cool. Well, and then, unless anybody else has any other questions, those are the primary questions that came up so far. Drew, thanks so much for taking the time to be able to meet with us and run through all of these things. This is super, super fun and super helpful. We'll send out the recording to everybody who registered for this, so we will get the recording out to you. And then you'll also hear from our teams just to be able to make sure that we get you set up with that enterprise trial. But Drew, thank you so much for taking the time with us today, and hope you have a great holiday, man.
Thank you. I hope you have a great holiday as well. And thanks everybody for joining and listening to me talk at you. I really appreciate you, hanging in there with me. And yeah, I hope everybody else has a great holiday as well.
Awesome. Well, hey, everybody, happy holidays, happy new year, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.